Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming to this session. Thanks for coming to the event. I don't know who was here already before the corona when it was sort of the last in-person version of the event, 2019. Anybody been here before? No? So the last time that I was here was in 2015, and I have a terrible memory for lots of things. Including dates of events, so I had to look that up. 2015 was the last time that I was here at Agile Türkiye Summit, and then, but I do remember when the first time I was here. That was 2014, the year before. It's only 1 year difference, and I still know why. In 2014, it was very strange. We had bought a new house, my wife and kids and I, and we were moving houses, and we got the keys to our new house in October. And the event was probably somewhere beginning of November, so we had the keys, but we hadn't moved houses yet. And I was here in a hotel. It was a different hotel than this one for the event. And I was sort of trying to get some sleep. It was early in the night, and I get a phone call. And I'd forgotten to put off my phone. And that was terrible, but anyway, it was a number from Belgium. And that's why I remember 2014, new house and so on. So I picked up the phone anyhow. I was sort of half asleep. I got a strange call. Said, hey, Mr. Verheyen, I'm sorry to disturb you, but this is doctor, and then some name, a doctor from Ekeren. Now, Ekeren is a place where I live. So imagine, sort of early in the night, getting a call from a doctor that I don't know. I didn't know who he was. Give me a call, and my kids tell me I'm a real drama queen. And I showed off by then. I was, oh no, my God, something's happening to my family. Oh, I hope they're still alive. I hope at least one of them is still alive. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening here? There's a phone call, middle of the night. I'm in Istanbul, I'm in Turkey. Tell me what's going on. Yeah, sorry to disturb you, Mr. Verheyen. My heartbeat. And then, sorry, but I think my cat is in your cellar. Can we please come to pick her up? Can you share the keys with us? I'm in Istanbul, Turkey. It's going to be quite difficult, but... And then I start relaxing, and I had to try to give her a presentation. But that's why I know 2014, new house. Oh yeah, that was my first time in Istanbul, in Turkey, because I remember getting this strange phone call somewhere in the middle of the night. But let's talk about what I like to call moving your Scrum downfield. And it's sort of combining future and past in it. And it started somewhere in the past, I don't know, a long time ago, 10 years ago actually, I wrote a little book. It's called Scrum, a Pocket Guide or a Pocket Guide to Scrum. And I ended my book with a quote of that expressed my belief that at least at some point of time, Scrum will have become the standard way of working. And organizations will have sort of re-emerged around Scrum. Because that's sort of the hope we have with Scrum. And prescribing this sort of minimal framework with a minimal set of rules. And then organizations start implementing it, adopting it, living by it and enacting it. And then rethinking all the organizational structures around Scrum. And 10 years later, and I think that needs a little bit of a boost. Because I feel that it's not happening enough. And it's even worse. I'm currently working on the 4th edition of my book. So the 3rd edition was from a couple of years ago. And looking into those things, and you see in the background some sort of spiral. So in a book I talk about sort of the waves of Scrum. There's been several waves of Scrum that have some sort of common themes in them. So every wave is known by a theme. And it's sort of a whirlwind, so it's difficult to see what is happening. So I try to, by visiting people and talking to people around the world, I try to get some sense of what is happening out there in the world. Because it's a really strange thing. We're all unique, we're all different. And at the same time, it seems that in terms of adoption of Scrum and leaving that industrial thinking behind us, there's a lot of things coming back, no matter what place in the world you go to. So there's something strange happening in our minds that seems to be the same all over the world. And that re-emerging those structures is something that is really needed. And when thinking about that waves, I feel that we're sort of on the edge of sort of a new wave, a new era of Scrum, no matter how you want to call it. What I've seen in a lot of countries is sort of this, what I would call failed agile transformations. People trying to become whatever they call agile by transformations and and in the end they try to follow some sort of cookbook model or copy-paste what other people are doing and just some blueprints and whatever, and they forget the fact that agility is sort of a unique signature of an organization, departments, teams, the people working there, the history of the organization. You can't just copy-paste something, right? That's sort of trying to become Scrum in an industrial way. That's what I call industrializing your Scrum to death. It's not really helpful. It helps you adopt Scrum, and then people follow the process, and that's about it. And I honestly think we're sort of on the edge of a new wave of Scrum, and this is sort of my little call to action to everybody around the world, looking for courageous people that are willing to stand up and challenge that status quo again. Because I think the future of Scrum will be in the hands of those people, and it will be in the hands of organizations that have the courage to rethink their structures around Scrum. And it's going to be really, really, really important as far as I'm concerned. And I started thinking about this a few years ago. It was even at the start of the Corona crisis. I know this is the first in-person event again after the Corona crisis. It's sold out, 1,100, whatever people, amazing. It's sort of the same amount of people that were here before the Corona. So it almost feels like, oh, nothing happened. But I do remember what happened, all the lockdowns and so on, remember? So the first lockdown, early 2020, got me sort of out of work a lot because you couldn't see people, you couldn't touch people, you couldn't feel people. So no consulting, no classes could happen anymore. It was sort of, everybody was thinking, what are we going to do, remote and so on. And I used that time to write a little paper, and I called it Moving Your Scrum Downfield. Because I was highly annoyed, certainly at that time, still am, about those pointless debates out there on social media platforms, community things about sort of the points and the commas and nuts and the bolts of the Scrum Guide. Yeah, why this word, and why do they use that word, and what might they mean with that word, and so on. I was like, yeah, get over that sort of terminology obsession that we have. So I've tried to describe in that paper what is needed to move your Scrum downfield and get across those terminology, I don't know, debates and wars and discussions. And I try to describe the 6 traits that for me are essential in Scrum, despite, in a way, how you call it. And you can see them on the screen. It's the simplicity of Scrum. It seems to be very, very difficult. Simple is not simple, it seems, at least not easy. It's about what I call Scrum's DNA, the combination of self-organization and empiricism, where I see a lot of organizations focusing on the process aspect of Scrum, the empiricism. So they've got empiricism, they follow the process, but they forget this self-organizing part of Scrum. They forget to trust their people. They forget that, that they can trust the people to do the job that they were hired for. No, I have to look over them and breathe down their neck all day long. So that's Scrum's DNA, accountability, transparency, organizing your product backlog so that you can create a flow of value, regularly closing the loops, and I mean not just as a sprint and a daily Scrum, but on top of that, development practices, testing practices, anything that can help you close feedback loops within your sprint, and even close, very important, close the feedback loops with your users and your consumers, your customers. So that's not really happening, and then obviously the Scrum values. And then I had sort of the same reaction for myself as this lady has. Moving your Scrum downfield, there must be more to it. Please tell me there's more to it. And I started thinking about it, and actually it is. So helping organizations, teams, feel those 6 traits that should be in the way that the game of Scrum is being played, that is helpful, but there is actually more. And it should be about that sort of rethinking structures around Scrum. And that's something that most organizations seem to sort of shy away from. And I think it's really needed. So I started thinking about other things that I've been doing. So this was 2020, writing that paper. And I thought back, 2016, 2017, sort of in the middle of this agile transformation hype around the world, and trying to offer people an alternative to that. Instead of that industrial approach to becoming agile, which, by the way, will never work anyhow, cookbook, copy-pasting things and so on, all teams having to go through the same sort of trainings, ending up with all teams across the whole organization having to do 2-week sprints and all starting and ending on the same date. That is sort of exactly industrializing your Scrum to death. So I've tried to make it small again. And I remember by the end of, must have been probably 2015, there was some people in our community asked me, Gunther, how do you see the future of Agile? First of all, difficult question because I've never seen myself as Agile. I'm just this simple little Scrum guy. And then I said, well, the future of Agile for me is in the small. And I'll tell you why, and we'll build up to that. But in 2016, 17, I've tried to give people an alternative. I called it to reversify your organization. And it has sort of two feedback loops that should be connected to each other. And the first thing was, let's reimagine your Scrum. So you've adopted Scrum. You've made all of the teams apply the same practices, follow the same patterns, go through the same classes, do 2-week sprints, and so on. Let's rethink that. You've made it very big Agile transformation. Let's make it small again. And let's have a look at one of your initiatives where you're using Scrum. And let's try to identify the product that you're using. Because what I see in those organizations, certainly that industrial approach, you've got all those little sort of micro Scrum teams working disconnectedly, separately, isolated from each other. Not really helpful. Often within existing silos within organizations. And then you still have those sort of waterfall underneath that. Because one team hands over work to another team and to the release department or the QA, whatever department. And what's the point of having all those teams working in 2-week sprints if you have 10 teams that in the end have to sort of continue the work of other teams? It's not really helpful. So there's a waterfall underneath that. You call it Scrum, but maybe not really helpful. And it's often because those teams, often even without knowing it in a way, are working on the same product. They're building a component, the other ones are building it further, continuing it. Other teams are building another component. And it's like, yeah, but who's taking care of the product? The overarching thing that in the end brings value. And a product might be a service, it might be a physical product, might be a digital product. Think in terms of value stream potentially, something to bring start to finish value to a consumer. And not just one little subsystem or some part of some IT system. Let's not call that a product. And in that paper, earlier in 2020, I called product the vehicle to deliver value. So Scrum is in a way all about product, and product is the vehicle to deliver value. It's also in the Scrum Guide, by the way. I was silly thinking, yeah, read the Scrum Guide. But it's in there for a reason. So think about what is your product, because in the end, product is the scope of your Scrum. So I helped organizations rethink or reimagine their Scrum. Since start with product, let's then have a look at the skills, accountabilities that you have, and let's reorganize them. Let's reset your Scrum teams based upon self-organization around that product, so that you can start building up towards releasing what I call tasty sashimi slices of your products. Things that people can digest, that they like to taste, that they can give you feedback on, rather than keeping it somewhere within the company. But that's only the first part. It's not an easy part, but I do that for product one, and then maybe for the next product, and then another product. So making the change in that sense small again, but also iterative incremental, which is the essence of what we do, iterative incremental approaches. So use Scrum to become Scrum. But it doesn't stop there. While doing that, rethink your structures around Scrum. How do you deal with people? HR procedures. How do you do performance reviews? How you do budgeting, governance, how you work with quality, how you work with product managers and so on. That should all be rethought if you really want to get the most out of Scrum. And then that is what I started calling moving your Scrum downfield. And it's a subtlety, I know, but from the titles of that paper to this sort of whatever approach, I will never turn this into a model or a framework. I think we've got enough of them, right? People that are trying to sell their own things, and then licensing schemes and certification schemes or so. So trying to stay away from that, very, very, very difficult, because some people seem to expect it. But from that paper to this, so I put the your between brackets. Because that paper was about moving your Scrum, your instance, your implementation of Scrum downfield by having a look at those traits. Do you have those traits in the way that you play Scrum? So have a look at it, despite the terminology. But I believe that if we all start moving our Scrum instances downfield, together, collectively, bottom up, we will move Scrum as a global movement downfield. And I think it's needed more than ever. Not just to keep Scrum relevant, but also to get that sense of self-organization. It's something that I call humanizing the workplace. You want to increase your productivity? Fine. Humanize the workplace. Create more humane work environments using Scrum, building on, trusting people to do what they want, what they can, what they were hired for, and then getting sort of risk mitigation, risk control out of the fact that we organize things in short cycles. You can lose a sprint. So what? 2-3 weeks of work. It's no longer like that. But within the sprint, let people do their job. So that's behind this. And of those two big change loops or feedback loops, you want to call it, I want to focus today on what I call re-emerging the structures around Scrum. The most difficult thing, the thing that is going to require courageous practitioners to stand up within their organizations and challenge that status quo. Because I feel around the world, Scrum is stagnating. So we've gone from massive use of waterfall and sort of sequential thinking towards sort of massive adoption of Scrum. Is that an improvement? Absolutely, but we can do so much more. And that's what I call re-emerging the structures around Scrum. It's got a couple of steps that are really important. So let me go through them. And let me start by saying, don't do Scrum because of Scrum. It's not helpful. What is the why of your Scrum? Why is your organization adopting Scrum? Why do they want to use Scrum? So don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. It will not help, because adopting Scrum will get you through lots of ups and downs, and it's going to be a bumpy road. Knowing why you're doing it will help you go through those downs and those cycles of fear and whatever you'll go through. So think about the purpose of your Scrum. So Scrum cannot be the purpose of Scrum. Don't do Scrum because of Scrum. And in that paper, I had a little definition of Scrum in the back of my mind. And in my definition, I want to have sort of 4 elements in that. Scrum is all about empiricism, right? That's one aspect of Scrum's DNA. Scrum is all about people, self-organizing people, trusting people, accountable people. And we need that in order to tackle complex challenges. But Scrum is about delivering or getting value from tackling those complex challenges. So it's about value, not volume. Most organizations introduce Scrum to do more and faster and quicker and whatever. Don't need to feature factory, whatever. That's all great, fantastic. What is the point of delivering more features if you're heading in the wrong direction? If you don't keep in mind your users, your consumers, what is the point of doing whatever you would call it, DevOps, continuous delivery, putting out updates of your products out there every day when you're sort of overloading your users and you're sort of like decreasing customer satisfaction instead of increasing it. So we're not taking into account the delivery of value, something that people appreciate, that people actually need. So if you want to think about your purpose of Scrum, and you're looking for some ideas, think about value. And then define value. Right? We call product the vehicle of value. So think about that. And I came up with this little acronym. My first acronym ever, by the way. So I've been doing Scrum now for over 20 years. Although my life of Scrum started in 2003, but it wasn't actually with Scrum. It was with extreme programming. And I know if anybody has experience with that, go for it, read about it, try doing it. Really important. Within the framework of Scrum, practices like the ones from extreme programming, really, really important, really useful. So my life of Scrum 20 years ago didn't start with Scrum. It started with extreme programming, really important. And then we wrapped extreme programming practices in that framework of Scrum. So Scrum can wrap a lot of practices. But in the end, you want to do your Scrum for value. And then how to arm for that? Maybe not the best terminology in the state of the world that we have today, because it's not really about weaponizing. But it starts with organizing your product backlog for value. So assume that you will be delivering value with your product backlog. Or you could call it anticipate, which is lovely because it both starts with an A. Yeah? Assume value, anticipate value, think about value when you're organizing your product backlog. Think about what items are most important, which ones will bring the most value at the current moment of time. And then release, because you can make assumptions. That's why I like assume, because it's about assumptions. As long as you don't release, it's still an assumption. And you're just accumulating assumptions. As long as you don't release, you don't put it in production, you don't go out to the market. It's an assumption, it's gigantic. You think you are increasing value, but you have no idea, because as long as you don't release, you don't know. But even after releasing, you have to measure it, you have to collect feedback. So organize your product backlog for value, release regularly, frequently, and then if you're then not capturing feedback, collecting feedback from your actual users, you still don't know. So measure it. And for me, that's really important, because creating increments in Scrum, really important, because they are like the vehicle of value, but that is output. You want to know the impact you have with your output. So you want to move from output to outcome. What is the impact that we have? What is the actual value? You think you're delivering value, but you don't know until you actually measure it. You collect feedback. And it can be in different ways, but it has to be about the product, the service, sort of the value stream, whatever you want to call it. It's not about the company in general. As a product owner, you want to know about the impact that your product is having on your user base against your competitors, competing products, and so on. So think about that. And do that again and again and again. Use that iterative, incremental way of thinking, so that you see patterns, that you see trends, that you don't have to overly focus on one data point only. It's also a way to avoid those measurements becoming targets. You know, one of the biggest dysfunctions in organizations, when goals, objectives, whatever you call it, some people would call them these days OKRs, biggest problem with them, they all turn into targets, must achieve things, and then bonuses are tied into that. And then you know how we human beings are. We start lying, we start cheating, we start backstabbing, whatever we need to make our target. If a target, so use it as measurements, metrics, indicators of a situation. It's not about good or bad. If your customer satisfaction is going down, good. And something you can do about it. So don't lie as if it's going up. Not helpful. You're denying yourself the right to actually adapt to that. So keep doing that. And if you want to think about what does value mean, because value in a way is just a generic word, think about value for whom? Who are we trying to satisfy? Who are we doing this for? And obviously, I hope you would agree that in the first place, we're doing this for the consumers of our products. The people that have to consume our product, that have to use it, that are trying to use it to tackle challenges and solve their problems. So in the end, those are the people that primarily we're doing it for. But often, not often, in general, certainly in commercial organizations, we're also doing it for the organization, right? And I call that the sponsors. And I chose that word carefully because it's the people funding you, sponsoring you, helping you, making sure that you, with your teams, can do your work. And in that sense, not intervening on how you do the work, but making sure that you can do your work, hoping that you will bring some value for them. And value for consumers can be represented in terms like customer satisfaction, market share, the usage of your products, how many features are being used, how many features are not being used, conversion of users and so on into buying customers, whatever, people going through the complete processes that you offer them, or they're stopping somewhere in the middle, all indicators of the fact that are you providing value to the consumers of your product? Are you having a positive impact? What is the benefit that people get from your products? And for sponsors, that's often, certainly in commercial organizations, often, almost always something with money. Benefits, revenues, increasing sales, might be also in things like hurting the competition, but often it's something like that. In a non-commercial organization, might be different. So think about it. But don't forget value. For me, the adoption of Scrum should also bring value or be valuable for the people doing the work. In that sense, what is the point of having a high customer satisfaction, lots of money being brought to the company, while we keep burning out people? While people want to leave the company, people look for other things, people end up in this, you know what, I'm going to block myself from all those things around me and end up in this sort of 9-to-5 mentality where I'm always happy that I got my salary by the end of the month, and that's it. So people not engaging, not committing, not being dedicated to what they're doing. So what's the point? Long-term absenteeism. I don't know how that is over here in Turkey, but it seems to be a global thing also. Depressions, burnout of people, long-term absenteeism, sickness, illness, stress. It's crazy. It's crazy. Let's use Scrum to sort of stop this rat race and humanize the workplace. So don't forget about value for the people doing the work, the creators, I call them. But there might be even more to that. So this is sort of, let's say, value. Most people will think about value for consumers, value for the organization via the stakeholders. Some people might think about value for the teams, the people doing the work, so think about it. But it doesn't have to stop there. What if we would try to restore, as organizations, as enterprises, sort of some accountability towards society, towards the world, towards the planet, towards the environment? And that's what I mean with this special beneficiary of value. What about thinking about the environment? What about thinking about value for society? Yeah? And certainly for the environment, it might be thinking in terms of power consumption, exhaust things. Yeah? By the way, funny thing is, by not building features that nobody wants and not building databases that nobody wants, you will be limiting your footprint. And it has an impact on the world. So think about it, it's not that difficult. But as an IT sector or a software development sector, we do have an impact. We have sort of the impact of a sort of average country as a whole IT sector. And it's only increasing, as you imagine. The world is full of software, full of IT. It's only increasing. We are so dependent on it. It's so critical. I don't know if that ever would happen in Turkey, but I can't imagine in Belgium, sort of imagine somebody cuts off the internet just for one day. Our society will just stop. We wouldn't know what to do. And I'm not talking about my kids not having internet access, but really society would just stop. Electricity supplies, water supplies, whatever, things, lights, traffic lights, whatever, it would just stop. So think about it. I've been talking about value a lot over the past couple of years, and at some point of time I was doing it at a large bank in the Netherlands, and then a wonderful lady, Marjolein Pilon, you can see her name here, came up to me, and I got her in touch with Scrum.org, and she did an interview with Dave West, CEO of Scrum.org, about it. You can look those things up. I will share a PDF version of this, including the URLs, so have a look. They had a great talk about it. Marjolein is focusing on this. I like these expressions, the planet as a stakeholder. What if we would consider the planet as a stakeholder? So value for the users, consumers, value for the sponsors, value for the teams, the creators, but also value for society, for the planet. Why not? It's not that difficult. And if you want to know what might be indicators that you are able to create value for those parties, well, think first of all, are you actually creating value? Is the work that you're doing actually valuable? Yes, no. And try to think in terms of metrics for that. It might be customer satisfaction, it's just examples. Feature usage, financial returns for your organization, market share. Think about it, but you need to capture those, otherwise you have no idea. Are we actually delivering value? And value, again, is a very different thing than volume. You can put out, whatever I'm concerned, 10 updates a day with 20 updated features a day. That doesn't mean it's valuable. It just means you're doing more. Doesn't mean you're doing the right stuff. The whole idea of Scrum is doing the right stuff via the product owner with a great team of developers doing it in the right way. So the what and the how combined. Yeah? So think in terms of actual value for those parties, sponsors, stakeholders, the teams themselves, consumers, the planet, society. But also use Scrum to discover new value. Imagine you've got a sort of high value creation right now, producing lots of value, everybody's happy. That doesn't mean that you're future-proof. You want to use Scrum to free up time, energy of people, brain energy, whatever, brain space, to think about new things. Because I'm so surprised that in most organizations, even if they do Scrum and they do it properly, that in general they're just tweaking existing features of existing products. So if I go in and ask, so how many really new innovative features of functional capabilities have you built over the past 2 years? It's disappointing. Yeah, no, we're tweaking this, adding a little bit over there and so on. It's like, okay, but what about new things? And even worse, what about new products? Yeah, it's difficult because we've got already all these products. What about taking a product out of the market? You'll still 3 people using it. yeah, so, and how complex does it make your landscape, and how difficult does it make you to add features to that product and so on, by keeping those things sort of artificially alive. And I recently, unfortunately, got a good, positive example of that. So when I started doing online teaching and those things, I had to look for a sort of digital tools to help me do that. And I got lots of problems with my brains. I can't remember names like dates and so on, faces. Another thing is most of the tools are really too complicated for me. I don't know if you know them all, Mural, all those things. Back in 2020, first lockdown, after recovering what was happening to us, I looked into those tools and, oh my God, it's too complicated. I don't understand them. I can't work with them. And then somebody showed me a Google Jamboard. So Jamboard, it's the digital whiteboard tool of Google. And I totally love it. It's simple, it's clear, straightforward, and so on. So I sort of revived completely, started doing things online. Google has recently decided to kill my favorite product. So Google is a real product company. If they don't believe in a product anymore, if it doesn't make sense, they will kill it. Who remembers Google Glass? Those nasty words of Apple do the same. They killed a long time ago my favorite product, the iPod with the turning wheel. Who remembers that? Oh, I love that thing. So the iPod and then the turning wheel, oh my, and they killed it. It's probably business-wise for them a good and healthy decision, and I'm still using Google and Apple products and so on. So it didn't really. So think about it. It's still 3 people using it. Terminate it. Why not? Think about building new products by freeing up time and energy to build new stuff. So think about using Scrum to discover new stuff. And agility or being agile is all about that. So the purpose of Agile, remember the first, I don't know if you remember, the first statement, the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, our main principle, main ambition, whatever it is, to deliver valuable software to consumers. By then it was purely software, but it was delivering value. And that is what agility is about. So Agile, becoming Agile, whatever, via Scrum, should help you achieve that sort of higher up purpose. Don't do Agile because you want to be Agile. Do it for a reason, to deliver value. Eh? And the fact that you're able to deliver new value might be expressed in things like what I call feature turnover rate. If you look at all the features of a system, an application, a product, a service, how many of those features have been in there for a very long time? How many of them have disappeared, replaced by other things? And if that turnover rate is really low, that means not really a turnover of features, there might be something wrong with the product, might be actually a dead product, you don't know. So try to measure that, the same for product turnover rate and so on. And your agility might then be expressed in things like things that impede you to be more agile. That might be, how done is your increment actually by the end of sprint? Is it actually releasable? Or is it just, no, it's an increment and then we have to ship it to another department or another team or another thing. So think about that. So knowing your product, important in 2 ways. First of all, you will think about what is value for this product. Who are the consumers? What are we trying to achieve with those users? How does it help the organization achieve its mission or vision statement? Whatever. But also in terms of what does it mean to have a done, releasable increment ready? No later than by the end of the sprint. And that done, that level of doneness, that should define what skills and expertise you need in the team. So think about it. It's all about reimagining your Scrum. Because often most organizations, they have a level of done, which is hardly releasable, but it's all they can do given the expertise and skills they have in the team. It should be the other way around. Start with your product, start with your definition of done for your product, and then make sure that you have Scrum teams with all the skills and expertise to make that happen. But the difficulty is that you've got all those silos within your organization, you will end up with a Scrum team that needs expertise and skills from all those silos. But that's the only way forward, I believe, with Scrum. Yeah? So, but again, think about this for yourself. These are just samples, examples of potential indicators. Think for yourself, what does value mean for us? What does value mean for our stakeholders, for our consumers? Maybe even take into account the planet, certainly also the teams in terms of engagement and that intrinsic motivation. You want to see Scrum, you want to use Scrum, and you will see energy levels of people going up again. You would like to see that they enjoy coming to work again. That's the idea for me of Scrum, that's that people aspect. But, like I said, there is more. And that is because measuring value is like applicable to every event that we have in Scrum. They're all about adaptation. So in Scrum, that empirical process, transparency, inspection, adaptation, it's not about the inspection. It's about what are you going to do with your observations, your findings. So just inspection because of inspection, pointless in Scrum. Stop doing that. It makes no sense. Using the events in Scrum just for reporting purposes, status updates and so on, it's pointless. If you're not willing and if your ambition is not to use your inspections to think about potential adaptations, it makes no sense. The same goes for those measurements. So if you're measuring your ability to deliver value without the idea of enacting upon those findings, then it makes no sense. So think about arming for value, but then think about turning that into what I call an armada of value. So not only in my 20 years of Scrum have I found one acronym, I now have two. I'm so proud of myself. No. So think about arming for value, but use that to adapt. So turn it into an armada of value. So adapt upon your findings. Think about what do we need to change in order to further optimize for value, not for volume. And not to keep oppressing people. Yeah? So think about, put value there. It's sort of a virtual feedback loop you put around your Scrum teams. Value loop. And then you've got those indicators that you are delivering value, but it's the adaptation that counts. So work with your teams. What are they missing? Is it in terms of skills, expertise? Do they miss the tools? Do they have access to systems, authorizations? Whatever, you can't touch this, whatever. Are you overloading them with bureaucracy, processes, governance, and so on that are not really valuable activities? So think about that. Do they have the tools in place? Do they have the guidelines in place that they can act upon? So work with your Scrum teams. In that sense, optimize your Scrum zone for value. But again, it shouldn't stop there. And that's even the more difficult part. Ultimately, adapt the organization to get more out of Scrum. And that means setting up what I call product hubs. So start with product, rethink your Scrum for your product, and then rethink all the activities around that. So in Scrum, we've got this person called a product owner. So product owner should be at the heart of the product. So the life of a product owner should not revolve around a certain expertise, specialty, whatever, sales, marketing, whatever, product management. No, it should be about the product. It should be sort of the owner of the product. So I call in my classes sort of the product CEO of the product. And then probably for the delivery of the product, the maintaining, evolving, changing, updating, whatever of the product, you will need Scrum teams or development teams, or as they are now called, teams of developers. Yeah. So I'm not saying that for all those other activities that you need to do for a product, meaning selling the product, marketing the product, promoting it, thinking about the financials of the product, market research, whatever, I'm the last one to say that you have to use Scrum for all of that. But there should be a product owner at the heart of it. So all decisions, also made by product managers, whatever, should be consulted with the product owner. But ultimately, in forming a product hub, you want to create an ecosystem around your product. So not just deliver the product, but if you have to do marketing, promotion for the product, that should be done as part of the same ecosystem. So not some sort of faraway activity by people that are not connected to what we're doing. So and that product hub, that is totally in line with that paper where we got the name Scrum from. I don't know if anybody knows, 1986, the new product development game. That is almost literally a statement from the new product development game. Management acting as investors, they call it venture things, but that sounds too aggressive for me. So acting as an investor, not intervening on a daily basis, making sure that the team or the teams can do their work. So that product hub would be like a sort of startup within the organization. And it makes this whole thing of agile transformation small again, for one product only. Reimagine your Scrum. Rethink all the activities around your product. Bring them together. So rather than sort of trying to turn over that big pyramid structure that you might have in place, do that step by step by step. One product. and then organize, form the people around the product across those lines and silos, across that big separation that exists between business and IT, which is sort of totally not helpful. It's really harmful even. So organize around one product. For the next product, keep updating and optimizing the one product. And in the end, what you want to go for is that sort of networked structure of organizations, where you reform a little part of the organization into a product hub. You add a second product hub. And then you sort of embed, for me, agility in your organizational structures. Because a product hub can grow, it can shrink, it can disappear, you can merge two product hubs. That is rigid. This is flexible. This is, for me, what Agile is about. And this is what I had in mind by the end of 2015, when a few people asked me, how do you see the future of Scrum or of Agile, Gunther? I said, well, future Agile for me is in the small. Moving away from big Moloch types of organizations and creating this sort of network structure. And what ties them, what holds them all together is this idea of purpose. Why do we exist as an organization? So that you can adopt Scrum to reinforce the reason of existence of your organization. And that is what I call to reversify an organization. Restore sort of harmony within an organization, make it more humane. Less about only that process aspect, rethinking all the things around it. So I'm about 30 seconds over time. That's pretty okay, no? Okay, thank you very much for being here. I hope you got something out of it. I'll be here for the rest of the day because I don't want to ruin the rest of your lunch right now, so let's not take up time of your lunch. I'll be here. Enjoy your lunch, and thank you very much for being here. Yeah, okay, thank you, beautiful. Okay, enjoy lunch. If you have questions, think about it. Be that courageous Scrum practitioner to stand up within your organization. Challenge the status quo up to the point of just not getting fired.